In Archmage, you're playing as a mage who's attempting to build a powerful order of mages that become masters of several different schools of magic. You're going to be exploring and controlling different locations, recruiting followers, building a magnificent mage tower, training apprentices, and casting some pretty powerful spells. Your goal is to master the most amount of spells across 6 schools of magic and have the largest influence over the land. Okay, so we just hit 4,000 subscribers, so a big thank you to all of you and a big welcome to everyone that's joining in as well. Archmage actually was the very first game that I covered on my channel, so if you've been here from the very beginning when I made this ugly, disgusting video, comment down below so I can blow up a response full of very exciting emojis. If you want to, I'll link a video up there so you can see what my tutorials looked like when I first started this channel. Okay, so with all of that said, this is a very long overdue review, and here's a timeline of how today's review is going to play out. So starting first with how the game works in a nutshell. Every turn, you'll be moving one of these colored circles towards the center. When they all reach the middle, that's going to trigger endgame. And I think that's cool because thematically, they're supposed to represent planets aligning. So what you do on your turn is you make use of 5 movement points. You can move in any direction, and that's going to cost you 1 point. You can explore, which also costs another point, and you can battle, which costs 1 point as well. Now, where your mage ends up on the last turn triggers a whole series of events. So if you end at a camp, for instance, you can recruit a follower and gain more workers to place on different parts of the map. If you end on a wilderness tile, which are landscapes pretty much, you can rack up defensive wards there. Now on top of that, wilderness tiles are where you gain relics or pretty much resources that you can use to use spells. And if you end on a town, it'll allow you to do both. If you end your journey on one of the hybrid races or on one of the races depicted in the center, then that lets you start training your followers, and in turn, that's how you start gaining spells to cast. So you'll be spending 5 points to move, explore, attack, and then trigger all those events that I just mentioned, and then you end your turn. So that's a basic rundown of how Archmage works. So what I think Archmage does well is guiding you and kind of intending you to feel like a mage. Like the artwork is top notch. It's so well done, from the card art to the main board to the details of all the terrains and all the races. I think all of that is amazing. On top of that, the follower meeples, the unique Archmage, and the mage tower, all of that really adds to you feeling like a mage. The part that Archmage doesn't really make you feel like a mage, I think, is part of the execution. Let me explain. So when you think of a mage, you think of casting crazy spells and doing all this crazy damage. I feel like mages are notorious for being glass cannons, right? They have all this extra over-the-top elemental casting, right? You actually very rarely cast spells in this game, and it takes a lot of turns to build up and a lot of resource generation to get you to use stronger spells. And even if you have them in your spellbook, you barely get to use most of them because they're very, very specific. And in my opinion, they're a little bit too conditional. So for instance, here's a spell called Corrupt. It says, place a corrupt token beneath a fundamental apprentice on the tower board of each opponent. Subsequently, if an opponent is promoting apprentices from a spell area containing a corrupt apprentice, they must promote the corrupt apprentice. This corrupt apprentice will win all duels. During scoring, all corrupt apprentices in advanced or master level positions are worth -1 victory points. So like, a lot of the spells are so specific to the point where you don't get to use them as often. Here's another example. This spell is called Imprison, and it says if your mage currently occupies a location that contains an opponent's follower but no ward token, imprison the follower next to your tower board. This does not consume a movement point, and subsequently, when you gather in a town, collect 1 relic of your choosing for each imprisoned opponent follower. I feel like they're so specific to the point where you don't get to use them as frequently as you like to. So being unable to use those spells leaves you very unsatisfied, which is really sad because I really wanted to be able to reap all the rewards from everything that I've been gathering in order to use those spells. Now, secondly, I love the idea of having all of these schools of magic. There are 6 schools of magic, and that's a lot. And everyone has access to those same spells, but you can choose your skill tree. So you can spend all your resources attacking and gaining blood spells while another player keeps exploring and training apprentices in nature. I think that's a really cool and unique element to the game, and everyone having access to all the schools of magic, but you can choose which tier, which school, which skill tree you can kind of focus towards. That ended up being my favorite part of this game because you have this really awesome player board, and it really does feel like you're building up an army because you train more and more followers and they start mastering stronger and stronger spells, since thematically, to upgrade them, 2 students have to duel each other, and then they get upgraded, and in turn, you get a stronger spell card. But unfortunately, this ties back to the last point where Yes, you have the spell card now, but how often are you really going to have the opportunity to use said spell? Now, on top of that, using a spell also depletes your already limited resources, so the opportunity to use them is conditional, and the resources it takes to use your strongest spells also provides another barrier for you to cast those spells. I wanted to point out two other things that I kind of was iffy about for this game. First is with battle. When you attack another player, all you have to do is just use one of your 5 movement points, and then their follower just gets removed from the game. With games like Small World, I feel like that mechanic works well because that's the core of the game, and that's what the game is built upon. But for Archmage, I don't think that attacking by using 1 movement point works as well because that action gets repetitive, and I personally would rather have one big memorable moment. Like maybe you're dueling another player and playing card after card and rolling dice and strategically placing all your units somewhere where you get terrain bonuses, and instead, battle here feels like something that was tacked on versus being a core mechanic. I think bottom line, I just wanted battle to be more interesting, more involved, especially with all the access you have to different spells and all these followers. I feel like battle could be something way more immersive than just using your movement points to destroy another person's follower. And then lastly, this one is very minor, but compared to the rest, I did wish the mage colors were something more distinguishable, like red, blue, green, yellow, but instead the colors here are blue, white, gray, and brown. So with all that said, I do like the game. I would play it again. I mean, I've played it many times over the past, few years, but at the same time, the problems are present. Like the spellcasting is underwhelming. You're kind of longing for more mechanics, more memorable moments. Scoring conditions, I feel like, are a little too basic because it's whoever has the most amount of spells and whoever has control over the most tiles, instead of having like hidden objectives and combos with like different schools of magic. You can literally keep tabs on who's going to win the entire time, since your schoolbook is visible to everyone and the map is also visible to everyone. But bottom line, is the game worth playing? Yes, absolutely. I definitely feel like it's worth a shot. It has a ton of potential to be a very, very interesting game. I'm gonna play it again for sure. I did back the expansion and I'm still trying to find ways to hopefully make spellcasting more frequent. The production quality and the artwork is top notch. If I were to ever make my own board game in the future, I would love to have holofoil cards just like these. Like, these are beautiful. So nicely done. And even if this game came out a few years ago, I'm glad that it's taken a step towards mage-themed board games. I definitely want to see more of those in our niche. And those are my thoughts on Archmage. So comment down below if you've ever played this game before, or if you've experienced like the same things, or if you really enjoyed the game. I'd love to know what you think. Maybe you've seen Archmage in a local retailer and have had mixed thoughts about getting it. Whatever you're thinking, I'd love to know your thoughts down below. And until then, thank you all so much for taking time to listen to my thoughts on this game, and I will see you all in the next video.